Everybody, and welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jarrett, and I am here to answer all of your questions about politics. So, if you've got any questions about politics, just put them in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know that it can be like trying to learn a new language because there's all these different terms and people and abbreviations that we just kind of like toss around as though everybody knows what the ICC is or the NLRB is. So, this is the place where you can ask all of your questions and you don't have to worry about getting roasted or judged or ridiculed or debated. There's no judgments here, there's no fighting, there's no debating. I'm just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you're conservative or liberal, if you're a progressive, if you're a tanky, if you're a centrist. I will answer and engage with anybody. I am not here to fight or debate. I'm not here to prove you wrong. I am not here to call you dumb. This is not one of those shows where I call people up and then we yell at each other and then I own the other person. This is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions about politics, because I know that politics can be really difficult to learn about. There was a time when I didn't know a lot about politics and I was always really worried about asking my friends questions about it because I didn't want to seem uninformed. I was like, is this something that I should already know? Will they think I'm a big old dum dum for not automatically knowing this? And, there was at least one time in my life when I remember asking a question and my friends all shot a look at me like, did you really not know this kind of a thing? And I did not care for how that felt. So I have created this show where anybody can ask me anything about politics, and there's no judgment, there's no roasting, there's no debating. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. It can be very confusing because there's all these terms that get thrown around, like reconciliation or filibuster or continuing resolution. We just toss around people's last names as though everybody knows already who Hegseth or Patel or Bongino or Nome are. And if you don't know who these people are, it can be really difficult to be part of that conversation. Or we'll toss around like abbreviations for agencies like the NLRB or the ICC or, the FEC or the FTC or the FDA. What does the Department of the Interior do? And if you don't know these things, you don't know what's the purview of the State Department and stuff like that, it can be really difficult to figure out what's going on in our government. David's Orbit says, what do you think about ethical axiomatic governance over capitalism, socialism, or communism? I got to be honest with you, David's Orbit. I'm not really sure what you mean by ethical axiomatic governance. Yeah, I don't really truck in, $1,000 words like that. I read this paper, this book called A Spectre Haunting. That was this like very smart person's breakdown of the Communist Manifesto. And he used a lot of words like that, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult. So yeah, if you can dumb down your question, Davids, then maybe I can give you you know, my thoughts on it. I'd love to give you my thoughts on capitalism, socialism, or communism, though, if that's just what you're asking me for. Joel says thoughts on the Trump meme coin. It is one of the most blatant forms of corruption and grift that has potentially ever existed in our government. The President of the United States has activated a mechanism by which anybody, whether they are Americans, whether they are foreign nationals, whether they are bad faith actors, can anonymously send him millions, potentially billions of dollars that we will never know about, that we will never have a record of. Oh, excuse me. Oh, goodness. Really burpy for some reason today. So, yeah, that's the short version. Midnight says, at what point do you recommend armed resistance? Never. Nonviolence resistance is proven to be more effective at actually getting substantive change to happen in government. There is a political scientist named Erica Chenoweth who has reported on this extensively. So if you want more information about that, I recommend checking her out, Erica Chenoweth. David's Orbit says establish ethical axioms for the welfare of the population and establish government to uphold that welfare. Ethical axiomatic government. Establish ethical axioms for the welfare of the population. Yeah, you know, I think the issue there, David, and boy oh boy, we're really getting into some college level shit here. Let me swing back to that actually real quick. Christian says, should America make one of their territories a state? Probably not. Abe says, how does House of Cards reflect real concerns about corruption in Congress? House of Cards is not the TV show that people that work in government say mirrors government. They say that Veep is. Let's see here. Spencer Black says, my grandma probably in hell. I sure hope not. What did she do that made you think that? So yeah, as far as like establishing ethical axioms for the welfare of the population and established government to uphold that welfare, I'm for it. The issue with all three of those forms of government is in applying those axioms. In capitalism, we assume that the free market is going to take care of the population and it will, provide whatever ethical axiom we have pre-described to be the beneficial state of the community. And we have seen time and time again that is just like not the case. That capitalism does what capitalism does. That it makes a lot of money for a small group of people, and it treats human lives like commodities. It boils us all down to dollars and cents. Communism has a similar problem in that the groupthink of the masses can sometimes translate into authoritarianism, the way that we saw communism translate in places like Cuba and Russia. And as far as like socialism goes, same problem where you have countries that are quote unquote socialist like Venezuela operating more like kleptocracies and oligarchs. But I think the move is a combination of all three. I do think that there's probably some value to having private industry like capitalism, where you don't have to petition the government if you want to start a store or something like that. But I also think the government should be incentivizing companies to be employee owned, the way that like Bob's is or Publix. And I think that we need to be nationalizing more industries like healthcare that do not make sense as privatized. All right, thank you for your question though, David. Oh boy, that really made my noodle swim at this early hour of the day. Abe says, how can both a woman's and a baby's rights be protected in abortion? That's a really good question, Abe. It presupposes a couple of things. It presupposes that abortion is killing a baby, that we have the same definition of what a baby is. And I think that if you are a person who is quote unquote pro-life, need to do a couple of things. I think you need to, number one, reckon with the reality that you are in the minority, and so your job should not be to force everybody else in the country and world to live the way that you want them to live, but instead to convince them to live the way that you want them to live. The problem that I have with the Republican Party is that their option has always been to force and do so in a way that threatens the lives of every woman who encounters pregnancy. So that's number one. How are you going to live in the country with people like me who are pro-choice? The other question that I would have for you is, what is your ultimate goal? Is your ultimate goal that there is never any abortion, even in the case of rape and incest, and where it would protect the life and health of the mother? Because if what you want then is just to decrease the number of abortions, to make sure that there aren't the kind of birth control abortions that people on the right claim are running rampant, then I would suggest to you that the Republican Party is not trying to do that, because the things that actually stop those kinds of abortions from happening are sex education, access to contraception, access to family planning, increase the minimum wage so that people that get pregnant can then afford to have those children, free childcare or subsidized childcare, things like that. And those are all policies that the Republican Party is staunchly against. It seems as though What the Republican Party actually wants is not to stop or decrease the number of abortions, but to make people desperate, increase the number of accidental pregnancies, and then force people who can't afford to have children to have those children. All right, let's see here. Over on YouTube, we got, can you explain the Garland scandal? Do you mean Merrick Garland, Tyro? Because there could be a couple of different things you're talking about there. And over on Twitch, we got Gamer JM says, if the combined wealth of all the world's billionaires was liquidated, it would be enough to give every adult and child in Gaza $7 million to fund a new life somewhere peaceful. If the monsters who run everything are dead set on ethnic cleansing, at least be fair about it. You know, Gamer J, I have not done the math on that, so I don't know if that's accurate at all. But I will say this, that ethnic cleansing is bad no matter what. But yeah, you know, if you're going to do it, let's give all those people $7 million to relocate to wherever they want in the world. Alrighty. Let's see what we got in here. Ivermectin says, we care about how the subversive Jews have infiltrated every aspect of our lives. I don't know if you know this, Ivermectin, but that's anti-Semitism, so you can get the fuck out of here. We can see here. No one cares about these non-issues like pro-choice or healthcare. How interesting. Amberly N. Garcia 1 says, how do you feel about Alligator Alcatraz? It's a concentration camp, and I'm against concentration camps. Let's see here. Only Sean Dale Davis says, your loop is wild. I don't know what you mean by that. Do you think I'm not live? Tay says, do you like Zoran Mamdani? I do. Fishing Guy says, so why does everyone act like voting third party is nuts? Look at what is going on with just two. Fishing Guy, the reason why voting third party is nuts is because there's no viable third party. There's no third party that can win on the national level. Most third parties are not actually trying to build up any kind of coalition or infrastructure to win on the national level. They're just funding these cash grab, ego driven spoiler candidate runs for president every 4 years. So, yeah, you know, if you can't win, all you're really doing is acting as a spoiler candidate for one of the two parties. You are a vote for a third party candidate is essentially a vote for the candidate that you hate the most, the one that you would have voted against if it were just down to two options. So yeah, if you like third parties and you want to make them more viable, then you should be advocating for things like ranked choice voting, which is the only way that we can make it so that third parties are not spoiler candidates. And the Republican Party is hostile to the idea of ranked choice voting. They actually have a bill to try to make it illegal. So if you want third parties and you want ranked choice voting, you need to vote for Democrats. You need to support Democrats. All right. Axe says Senator Cruz went on vacation while Mexico sent their best firefighters to help the Texas flood. That is accurate, Act. Funky Butt Gooner says, you're so handsome and smart, I kind of want you. Thank you for that, Funky Butt Gooner. To everybody over on Twitch and YouTube, I promise I didn't just make that up. That is somebody who, that is a real person. But I'm married, so sorry. You'll have to wait to see if my marriage lasts, you know? Glizzy N says, no, we can have third party without. I mean, you can have it, it just won't. No, there'll be no one elections. It will just be spoiler candidates. Becca Wow says, we told Cuomo no with ranked voting. You damn sure did, and I'm so glad you did. Abe says, why do politicians listen to donors over voters? Because donors have access to a lot of money that makes it easier for them to win campaigns. You know, if a donor gives you money to win your campaign, it makes it easier to win. If a donor gives money to your adversary, then not only do you need to raise money to counter that, but also there's all these negative ads now about you that you then have to counter. So, you know, we've created a political system where people with a lot of money have a lot of say because money is essential in winning elections, especially on the national level. Now, if that's something that you don't like, you should vote for the Democratic Party because part of the Democrats' platform is changing that system to get the money out of politics, reversing things like Citizens United, whereas the Republicans' platform and their activities have been to make more money accessible in politics. You know, look at Trump's fucking meme coin. That's just fucking dark money donations, you know? All right, going back over to Tyro Pillar says, with Mitch McConnell and the SCOTUS. Okay, yeah, I can get into that. Gamer JM says, if the stock market is a scam, I'm thinking of trying it. It kind of is, Gamer JM. I am not qualified to give any kind of like financial market advice whatsoever. But I say, play it conservative, buy and hold, that sort of thing. But yeah, don't listen to me about that. So yeah, Mitch McConnell, when Antonin Scalia, the Supreme Court justice, died, there was something like, I want to say like 14 months before the presidential election. But because Mitch McConnell was in charge of the Senate, he said that he was going to refuse to bring any Supreme Court nominee up for a vote. Now, this is something that could have made its way through the courts, because the Constitution is very clear about the Senate's role in this. Like, they don't get to block Supreme Court nominees just because they don't like who the president is. And, depending on which judges got the case and depending on how the Supreme Court voted on that, that could have been a fight that Democrats won. The issue there, though, is that the two candidates that we were looking at down the pipeline for the election were Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And the first black president, Barack Obama, who got criticized for everything. He got criticized for wanting mustard on his hamburger. He got criticized for wearing a tan suit. He got criticized for trying to make healthcare more affordable and accessible to American citizens, would have been smeared as a corrupt oligarch, dictator, fascist, if he had tried to shove through his Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland. So they tried doing other things. They tried being like, messengers about this, and just looking at the polling that said that Hillary Clinton was going to run away with this. So let the Supreme Court sit at 8 seats instead of 9, where we are going to get a Democratic president who will nominate an even more progressive or liberal justice than Merrick Garland. Knowing Hillary Clinton, she probably just would have gave it to Merrick Garland, but that's neither here nor there. The issue is that all the polls were wrong, and so Donald Trump won, and now we are suffering under the yoke of an extremely conservative Supreme Court with a 6-3 majority that is ruling for the Republican Party and the billionaire class against the best interest of the 99%. All right, CG Bake says, what's Obama, Clinton, McCain, Romney's, Bush's president-elect Gore, etc. doing about this mess? I mean, some of those people are dead, CG Bakes, so I'm not really sure what your point is there. Luke says, we need to put Israel interests first. We need to continue to support free healthcare for them. I think you're being sarcastic, Luke. RJ says, no, you are wrong, dude. It was ACA, and he tried. Please stop. What are you talking about, RJ? Dandy Dan says, now in next election, we really can't say make America great again and mean it. I don't really know what you mean by that, Dandy Dan. Abe says, can a system built on compromise truly serve justice? I mean, I think that there's no other way to have a, multiracial, rainbow coalition government and country, that we're a bunch of different kinds of people with a bunch of different and weird beliefs. And what's weird to you is normal to me and vice versa. And so, yeah, that is the foundation of, civilized society is compromise, is meeting people where they are and coming up with creative solutions where, not everybody gets everything that they want, but everybody can, is free to pursue their own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, Kay says, people want to show up every 4 years and vote third party without doing the work to make it viable. That is 100% agreed. Glizzy Ent says, that's why Kamala raised $1.4 billion. Not really sure what you mean by that, Glizzy. Matt says, how do we fix the problems with the DNC blocking candidates like Bernie and Mamdani? So the DNC is going to do whatever the DNC does, and they can try to block candidates and they can try to, support other candidates. It is not our job to try to change that. It is our job to vote for and work for and advocate for the candidates that we want. If there were more people doing more work to elect Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020, then maybe Bernie Sanders would have been the nominee. But the fact of the matter is, even without the DNC putting their finger on the scale for Clinton or Biden, they would have won those races. Their popularity, their voter turnout was just so far ahead of Bernie's, it's not even worth discussing. And Mamdani, he won. He won despite the fact that the certain people in the Democratic Party establishment leader positions tried to throw their weight behind who they thought was a more winnable candidate, maybe Cuomo, or maybe they had, maybe they had other shittier ulterior motives than just trying to play it safe to win elections, you know? So yeah, it doesn't matter. Don't think about what the DNC is doing. Don't be an armchair political observer who just wants to shake your finger and say, that's a bad messaging strategy. I don't like Nancy Pelosi. I don't like Chuck Schumer. Be the work. Do the work, you know? I was trying to get Katie Porter to win the Senate election in California. I preferred her over the other candidates, but she didn't win. And that's on me. I should have done more work. But Adam Schiff was still a great option. So I happily and excitedly voted for him. Let's see here. Everybody's talking about their safe words. That's pretty cool. Let's see here. Mabel says, YJU. I don't know what that means there. All right, Nick Cardoso. That is not a question about politics. Abe says, when does protecting freedom become a threat to democracy? That's a really good question, Abe. I'm not even sure, you know, what do you call it? I'm not even sure what you're trying to get at there, you know? FRNE, whole bunch of numbers, says, most broads regret voting for Kamala. That is wildly inaccurate, and it's a little sexist, so let's see here. Forrest Dickerson says, do you think we will have any more elections? We will, Forrest Dickerson, because elections are big and complicated. And yes, the Republican Party and Donald Trump will do things to try to steal and lie and cheat their way into victory, but we have agency here. We are able to put political pressure on our elected representatives to make sure that our votes are free and fair going forward. We can put political pressure on the judiciary to rule in ways that make sure that our votes are counted. And, you know, yeah, we have agency here. You know, it's not about sitting back and hoping and praying that the right people make the right calls. We have agency here. So do the work, you know. CIA Spook says, do you believe our government is controlled by Zionists? I do not. Carcinogenic says, you're hilarious. I am. Not here, but I am. Off topic, Abe says, do you want to run for president? No, I do not. Nick Cardoso says, what do you think about the Rock and Stephen A. Smith boat running for office? I'm against it. I don't think either of them really have the bona fides. Let's see here. CIA Spook says, how do you feel about AIPAC? I'm against them. Kara Selvaggio says, I want to join your live if possible to expose Governor Abbott and his un-American orders. Kara, I don't typically have people come up on my live streams, but if you have a question, I'll answer it. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Jarrett. My stream is called Ask Me Anything About Politics. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care if you have different politics than me. If you ask a question in good faith, I will answer it. I will engage with you. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to debate. I am just here to get people more activated and informed about what is going on in government, and let people know what they can do about things if they are unhappy with what is going on in our government. Spooky Charles says, what can us people do about alligator Auschwitz? So I am confident that there are groups in Florida who are working on this. So step one, I would just say, find them, join them. If you live in Florida, then you have elected representatives who are in charge of those districts or that state. And so you have the power to put political pressure on them by calling their office and visiting their office and forming political action groups with your buddies and having everybody make sure that everybody calls every single day and goes to the offices and make sure that they don't have a moment of peace if they ever try to eat out at a restaurant, you know, fucking get kicked out of that restaurant, you know, just make sure that they know how you feel about this. It is their job to listen to us. They work for us. We are their boss. Now, there are other bigger things that you can do as far as like organizing and recruiting and active and, you know, joining groups like Indivisible or Run for Something or Vote Save America. But the blueprint is the same. It is boycotting and political pressure and striking and protesting and recruiting and convincing, you know. But yeah, I would say step one, see who's already doing this work in Florida and just join them. One LT Mama says, what did Trump and Musk split ways? I guess Trump didn't like Musk. I guess he didn't like that Musk was so weird. He's such a weird guy that most people are like turned off by him. So yeah, maybe it was just as simple as that. All right. Excuse me for being so burpy today, everybody. All right. Thank you very much for your questions, everybody. My name is Jared. I'm here to answer all of your questions about politics. If you have any questions about politics, put them in the chat. I do not. Wait, hold on a second. It looks like this guy is being a jerk, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of you right now. All right. Yes. Thank you for being here, everybody. Yeah, I know that politics can be really confusing. It can be really intimidating to try to learn about it. So I am here to answer all of your questions about politics. And I don't care if you are a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care if you're a liberal or a conservative. I don't care what you call yourself, a communist, a socialist, a tanky, a fascist. Yeah, I don't care what side of the political spectrum you are on. If you are here in good faith, I will engage with you in good faith. I will answer your questions as best as I can. All right, but we are kind of light on questions today. So let's see here. Nick Cardoso says, if you were a president, would you add a bacon, egg, and cheese button to your desk? Sure. That sounds delicious. Looking for some questions here deep in the comments. CG Bake says, Al Gore is not dead. Romney isn't. Bush Jr. isn't. Obama's alive. Anyways, they should be. Oh, you meant McCain's is like Cindy McCain or Meghan McCain. So yeah, what are Obama, Clinton, McCain? Are you still here, CG Bakes? I don't know. It's been a while since you asked that. So what are they doing about this mess? They don't really have a lot of political power right now. So the only thing that they can do is be messengers. And, you know, some of them are using that platform and some of them aren't. I think that rightly, some of them view themselves as being counterproductive, where it is more the job of the new class to take up the mantle here. You know, I know that if Romney was out there, then everybody would be saying, oh my God, the Democrats are teaming up with Romney. The Democrats are just like the Republicans. There's no difference. Voting doesn't do anything, etc. If it was Obama, then everybody would be out there going, oh my God, Obama's the old guard. He's a capitalist shill. He's bought and paid for by the the big drone strike and shit like that. So there's positives and negatives to all of those big name tentpole politicians being involved in our current political moment. Chris Dewey 47 says, do you think we will survive Trump? How much of a mockery is he making of the U.S. in the world view? So first thing is 100% he is making a mockery of us around the world. It is embarrassing. It is disgusting that he is our representative. Yeah, it's a nightmare. But as far as like, will we survive? The answer is we will, if people like you and me do the work to survive this. If we just sit around and wait for somebody to come save us, then we will not survive this. Then America will turn into Russia circa today. It will turn into Turkey. It will turn into insert authoritarian hellhole here. Kay says, do you think the Epstein thing will actually open some MAGA's eyes to Trump lying? Probably not. There's always like this umbrella of, but Trump is okay, in these conspiracy theory circles. There are pretty substantive connections between Trump and Epstein that MAGA has already been ignoring. But the point is, I think, that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel are two. They were huge Epstein conspiracy theorists before they got into government, and now they are in charge of the FBI, so they have all the information, and they are saying that there's no conspiracy, that there's no client list, there's nothing being hidden from the American public. So the answer is either there's nothing or they're covering for somebody, and it's most likely Trump. Never Lose Your Smile says, do you think abortion is healthcare or schmurder? I think it's healthcare. Cole Blue says, how do you feel about him not releasing the Epstein list? It probably means that he's on it. Let's see here. Madden says, I think Epstein is just a big nothing burger. You're allowed to think that. Wendy Smith says, let them know we are here. Okay, Wendy Smith is here. Let's see here. Deshaun Core says, Trump will try to cancel the midterms. I'm sure he will. But whether or not he gets away with it is up to people like you and me, Deshaun. We are the ones who can allow that or not allow that to happen. Eru Abraham, good to see you again. Do you think donor states should withhold funding from welfare states? It's a really interesting question, Eru. Somebody asked me about that yesterday. Like, what can blue states do as far as like withholding taxpayer dollars? And the answer is not a lot. we can start the process of that, but the federal government doles out more money than they take in. So if every individual blue state would still be at the whim, would still be at a loss if they kept federal tax dollars from going to the government and the government did not send funding to blue states. So that's number one. Number two is it's kind of legally dubious as to whether or not that can happen. And especially like the mechanisms by which blue states could hold that money back, because people pay their taxes directly to the federal government. It would have to be in, not paying back grant money that the government, the federal government, footed for blue states, or changing the tax withholdings on everybody's paycheck to not include the federal deduction and stuff like that. All right, Tyro Pillar says, my minister supports Trump because of the economy, and I'm assuming abortion. Do you have any tips on those talking points? I tried asking what's a good economy, and he said people buying houses. Then he went on a tangent about flipping houses. Tyro, that was a massive question, and I 100% will answer it. I got a lot of love for you. But let me get back to some of these TikTok comments first. Then I'll get back over to that. Mr. Swift Crashmore says red states would just withhold oil. That's fine because blue states have been moving towards renewable energy. K2 says Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested and prosecuted for no reason at all. I know exactly where you got that, K2. Please stop watching Tucker Carlson. Hakeem Safe says, how do you feel about the Mossad holding blackmail over our politicians? That sounds like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, Hakeem. Charles DG222 says, is dignified access to water, food, and shelter considered a human right? I believe it is. Slayer313 says, how to get rid of AIPAC. This two-step process, Slayer. Number one, you need to stop listening to AIPAC. When billionaires who are pushing candidates who are in support of AIPAC or who will do AIPAC's bidding push out propaganda to you that says that these candidates are bad, that they're extreme, that they are anti-Semitic, you have to not believe it. And you have to make sure that other people don't believe it also. And number two is you have to vote for politicians that are willing to hold AIPAC's feet to the fire. You have to be willing to vote for politicians and do the work to elect politicians that are not going to get pushed around by AIPAC. And that means you doing the work. And I know that that sucks. Like, I don't like doing work either. But that is the only way that we fight back against the billionaire class, because the billionaire class loves what AIPAC is doing. So they're going to throw all of their money and weight behind the candidates that AIPAC supports. Let's see here. Charles DG222 says, if so, how much water, food, and shelter are human rights? I guess as much as it would take for a human to stay alive. Oof. K2 says, so what are your thoughts on the Ghislaine Maxwell ruling? I mean, I guess she was found guilty of whatever crime. Anybody who contributed to what, Epstein did, anybody who was guilty of doing statutory grapes through Jeffrey Epstein or not through Jeffrey Epstein, anybody who does that, they belong in jail, whether they are Republican or Democrat. Right now, the government is in control of the Republican Party. It was in control of the Republican Party when Epstein died, either through suicide or not. And it is currently, the FBI is currently under the control of Epstein conspiracy theorists. So if you got any issue with the way that this is being handled, then there is exactly one party to blame for that, and that is the Republican Party and Donald Trump. All right. Let's see here. All right, let's get over to Tyro. So number one, the economy. It's difficult because if your minister supports Trump, there's not facts or data points that are going to convince them. Like when we've done studies on this multiple times that, changing somebody's mind has nothing to do with data. It is a long process. It is a hard process that requires more listening than talking and finding common ground, which is really difficult to find with some people, and building on that. Trying to find the shared reality that you can engage in. Like if I'm trying to say that you should vote for Democrats because of climate change, but you don't believe that climate change is a thing, me showing you pictures of barren land that used to be glaciers or, deserts that used to be lakes is not going to convince you. We have to start with some sort of shared reality. And if you want more information about how to do that, there's a book called The Persuaders by an author named Anand Giridharadas, whose name I worked really hard to learn how to pronounce, and I would love my flowers from my regulars for saying that. Anand Giridharadas wrote a book called The Persuaders that I highly recommend for you. Now, as far as abortion is concerned, let me just say this really quickly. The economy always does better under Democrats than it does under Republicans. Trickle-down economics does not work. That is the only thing that Republicans are trying to accomplish. The housing crisis, the affordability crisis, inflation, all of the fault of Republicans. I don't think any of these data points are going to help in convincing your minister, but these are just facts. And the Republican Party isn't actually trying to decrease the number of abortions. If they were, they would be supporting policies like family planning, access to contraceptions, sex education, and doing things to make having a family more financially feasible, like increasing the minimum wage, subsidizing childcare, universal pre-K, things like that. All right. Caesar says, what did you put on pizza? I'm a straight cheese kind of fella. K2 says, inflation is down under Trump. Thank you to the Inflation Reduction Act, which happened under the Biden administration. There is a trickling, there's a delay effect to some of these policies because these mechanisms are so massive, K2. And also it's going back up because of Trump's stupid tariffs, and the value of the dollar is going down, and the value of the bond market is crashing under Trump. Chris Stewie 47 says there is faith in critical thinking, can't change faith, or it is extremely difficult. Yeah, that is accurate. Mr. Swift Crashmore says, if you want something, earn it. My tax dollars shouldn't go to lazy people. Lazy people like the sons of billionaires who have done nothing to get all of that money. Lazy people like Trump's fucking kids who are running around the world right now, cashing in on the fact that their dad is the president. Mr. Swift Crashmore. All right, yeah, looks like we got some fights happening in the TikTok comments, Natty Matt says, yes. I don't know what you mean by that, Natty Matt. Let's see here. I don't think rich, lazy people get my taxes. Yes, Natty Matt. We are in agreement here. Welcome, everybody, to the live stream. My name is Jarrett. This is Ask Me Anything About Politics. And I'm here to answer your questions about politics. I'm not here to fight, and I'm not here to debate. This is not one of those shows where I call people up and then we just yell at each other and I try to own them and they try to own me and we call each other idiots and we call each other uninformed and then we both get to clip it and send it to our various channels. I am here to engage in good faith. If you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're conservative, if you're liberal, if you're a progressive, if you're a centrist, I'm here for any kind of political engagement that you would like to have. Or if you're somebody that doesn't know a lot about politics, you can ask me anything about that. You can ask me what reconciliation is, or the filibuster, or a continuing resolution. You can ask me who these people in government are that people keep yelling about. What's a Hegseth? What's a Patel? What's a Bongino? You can ask me about three-letter agencies. Do you not know what the NLRB is? What does the FTC do versus the FEC versus the FDA? I know it can be difficult to figure out what the ICC is. And so this is the place where you can ask all those questions. Banda Boss, good to see you again. K2 says, I think Dems have some good ideas, but they always approach debate with such a pompous attitude. K2, I want to challenge that idea because Thomas says you like Trump. No, I do not. So K2, this idea that Democrats are pompous. Number one, if that's true, which I don't think it is, I would still much rather have a group of pompous people doing good things than a group of quote unquote, salt of the earth people doing shitty things, If the pompous person is right, I'm still going to vote for them, maybe there's this aesthetic on the Democratic Party of being these intellectual powerhouse elites that are looking down on the rest of us. That doesn't mean that climate change isn't real or that trickle-down economics works or that we should trust companies not to pollute our air and our water and our food and our medicines, by cutting their regulations and shit like that, Now, as far as the idea of Democrats being pompous is concerned, I don't think that's 100% accurate. I think that the Democratic politicians have probably the hardest job in politics, where they have a rainbow coalition that they are trying to hold together, and they have billionaires trying to poke holes in everything that they do. They have the Republican Party with access to a massive propaganda and misinformation channels that are, criticizing Democrats for even the good things that they do or making up lies about them, they're juggling 1,000 things. They got 1,000, pots on the stove that they're all trying to maintain. And additionally, I think that that whatever internet people that you are seeing who are maybe pompous or giving you that vibe are potentially not real. You know, like I think that if the billionaire class recognizes that if they paint Democrats as being populist intellectual elitists, pompous intellectual elitists, then why wouldn't they pay people to pretend to be that? You know, to pretend to be annoyingly pompous piece of shit Democrats on the internet looking down on everybody else. You know, maybe there are some real people who have just gotten tricked by the incentives of the algorithms to get lots of views and likes. You know, like fights get likes. But even that is being controlled by the billionaire class, you know, and it's doing their work for them. So, you know, the same way that I'm not going to judge a real life Republican based on what Republicans on the internet do and say, I hope that you don't judge the Democratic Party but why people on the left on the internet do and say. All right, scrolling down to the bottom of the TikTok comments. Trippy0087 says, how are Israel loyalty oaths real? I can say boycott the USA, but can't say boycott Israel. I'm against that policy, Trippy. It is evidence of how strong the Israeli lobby and AIPAC is as far as like swinging elections and threatening vulnerable politicians. But we have the opportunity to stop that by working to elect politicians that will stand up to AIPAC. Bandaboss says, what does the FTC do? The Federal Trade Commission. Bandaboss, how dare you? How dare you ask me a question that I told you that I could answer? That's some real fucking bullshit there. The FTC is basically a government agency that is in charge of commerce, making sure that the systems by which the economy works are fair, that companies are not, making unfair monopolistic practices and things like that. So it was the FTC under the Biden administration, led by Lina Khan, that was breaking up monopolies and things like that. So yeah, price fixing, price gouging, that would all fall under the purview of the FTC. Let's see here. Dan Blackwood said, I'm sick of being called pompous and deleted just because both my parents are famous ceramicists. Dan Blackwood, you got me again. Rena, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Mr. Swift Crashmore says, I work 90 hours a week. Why should my money go to someone who refuses to work? So, Mr. Swift Crashmore, I fucking completely agree with you. I don't think you should have to work 90 hours a week. I think that your boss should make less money because he is not working 90 hours a week. I think all these fucking billionaires should be taxed to the point where they actually have to do some fucking work in their lives. They're all just fucking sitting on their yachts and in their fucking private jets, eating caviar and lobster 3 meals a day, while people like me and you do the actual fucking work that makes them rich. So yeah, let's fucking tax them out of existence, and let's use the government to make people's lives like you and me easier, so you don't have to work 90 hours a week, my man. You are part of the group that benefits from the government that the Republicans and the billionaire class are trying to convince you is actually helping a different group of people. But the person is you, my man. Like, you are part of the 99%, unless you have like $500 million or some shit like that, in which case, yeah, I want to tax you, bro. Mr. Swift Crashmore says, I own a small trucking company. All right, well, good for you, buddy. You should pay your employees more. K2 says, well, truthfully, I wouldn't consider what you do work. Well, this isn't my job, bro. Let's see here. Mela Pella says, this is a Zionist shill. I think you meant shill, but no, I'm not. Bandaboss says, hey, but Jared, billionaires had to work a lot more than 90 hours a week to become billionaires. Almost every billionaire did not have to work to become a billionaire. Almost every single one of them inherited their wealth. Brad Smith says, if you tax them out of extinction, who will pay for everything? Everybody else, because we will suddenly have money to pay for things. This is the Henry Ford model. This is building an economy from the bottom up. When billionaires have money, they stash it in tax havens, just sits there. It creates a financial drought where we need money moving through things. We need poor people to get money because they will spend that money on the things that they need. Then businesses have more money and they can hire more people because they have more customers, et cetera, et cetera. When we starve the 99% and make it impossible for them to afford to buy things, that's when companies need to do layoffs because they have a smaller consumer base. Dan Blackburn says, I lived with a comedian. It's work, often at weird hours. That is accurate. Brad Smith says, if you tax them out of extinction, who will pay for everything? I just answered that one. Alyssa says, South Dakota has a 24-hour residency, and it can be a mailbox. Interesting voting. Not really sure what you mean by that, Alyssa. Let's see here. Completely Lawless says, billionaires don't get paid for what they're doing today. It's for all the risk they took years before. There are a lot of systems within our government, completely lawless, that protect billionaires from that risk. We bail out their companies constantly when they make risky decisions that threaten the bottom line because we're so concerned about protecting the jobs that they supposedly created for us. I would just say, just as a blanket statement to everybody watching this live, don't fall for billionaire propaganda, guys. Billionaires do not deserve to be aggrandized. Billionaires are the reason why we have problems. They're the reason why people like you and me can't afford nice things, why we have to constantly be making cuts, why we have to constantly be, tightening our belts, why there are people who are living on the streets, why there are people who can't afford the medication that they need, why people are rationing their fucking insulin. It's because of billionaires. It's not because of immigrants or Democrats or lazy people or trans kids. It's because of billionaires. It's because they are hoarding wealth and creating an artificial drought in our economy. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. KYJHG7 says, what do you think about the BBB? It is a massive transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. It is cutting valuable social services. It is going to make healthcare more expensive for everybody. It's going to make electricity more expensive for everybody. Also, that billionaires can afford one more golden yacht, one more fucking diamond-crusted back scratcher. Like, what the fuck? The billionaires don't have enough money? We need to give them some more? Jesus fucking Christ, man. Completely Lawless says there are 735 billionaires in the U.S. Those few people are responsible for everyone's struggles? Yes. Completely Lawless? Yes. 100%. It's the billionaires that control how much we get paid. It's the billionaires that control how much things cost. And hoarding money, again, creates artificial fiscal droughts. You got to think about the economy like the water cycle. Water rains down into lakes, which get pushed down into rivers, which feed all the plants and the animals. It eventually goes out into the ocean, where it gets, radiated back up into the sky, which then the clouds move back over to the land, and then it rains back down again, and the cycle continues. What billionaires do is take a ton of water and put it somewhere and just hold it. And so suddenly there is less water for humans and animals and trees and grass to drink. And suddenly we have all these lakes going dry and shit like that. And people are saying, oh, the lakes are going dry because the deer are drinking too much water, or we got too many trees in this country. No, it's the billionaires. It's the billionaires that are doing it. Alrighty. Joe says, so become a billionaire then. I would never do something that immoral. K2 says, not enough resources in the world for everyone to live a first world lifestyle. How do you reconcile? K2, I reject that premise. There is new data out that says everybody could have a perfectly nice lifestyle. Not everybody needs to have a private jet or drink lobster or eat lobster 3 meals a day. We just want basic fucking lives. We just want to be able to exist. And the billionaire class is keeping that from happening. Already. Let's see here. Banda Boss. What was your comment that you said that you just looked up? Banda Boss. I just checked it. Banda Boss. Where is your comment that you said that you just checked? Banda Boss. I don't see it. Banda Boss. You just said wow. Yeah. Banda Boss, is the thing on Google about billionaires have to work more than 90 hours a week? Is that what you Googled? K2 says, we can make 7 billion cars and infrastructure for the entire world. Yeah, but I think more importantly, I think that we should be, not making 7 billion cars. We should be doing public transportation. Let's see here. Completely Lawless says, 435,000 millionaires in NYC alone, the new middle class. I don't know what point you're making there, my man. Dan Blackbird says, we're also sold the lie that people are poor because they're lazy or rich because they work hard. Yeah, I can point to you 1,000 janitors and fast food workers that work harder than every single billionaire. K2 says, owning a car is part of the first world lifestyle. It doesn't have to be, K2. Let's see here. Completely Lawless says most billionaire value is in stocks, private or public, not hoarding liquidity. That is a tax haven. Completely Lawless. The fact that capital gains are taxed at a smaller rate than income is evidence of exactly what I'm fucking talking about, my man. Completely Lawless says business owners are the reason most people have jobs. Again, why are you guys simping so hard for the fucking billionaire class? I hope you're being paid to do this because it's kind of pathetic. Yeah, fucking these billionaires have been shoving this propaganda down your throats for so fucking long, man, that we are the ones that give you the jobs. We are the ones that give you the cool things like the iPhones and shit like that. All praise the billionaire class. Before there were billionaires, there were jobs. You know, there used to be these things called, mom and pop stores, but then they got bought up by fucking massive corporations owned by billionaires, and now we are all fucking indentured servants to fucking, Walmart and shit like that. All right. K2 says business owners are not synonymous with billionaires. That is accurate. Banda Boss says billionaires did a bunch of stuff for us too. Yes, Banda Boss, but mostly they take. Mostly they take by a lot. Banda Boss, for you, I would recommend a book called Winners Take All by Anand Giridharadas. Kirsten, what a hot looking lady. What should we do politically about spiders? That's my wife. She saw some spiders last night that scared her, and I had to go take care of them. Lovely X Vamp says, do you think Trump is going to bomb Russia or China? Most likely not. Banda Boss says, billionaires did a bunch of stuff for us too. That's the comment that I made. Yeah. Check out that book, Banda Boss. Winners take all. Billionaires are fucking bullshits. That is 100% the long and short of things. And all of these fucking narratives around, all the great things that billionaires do to us, it's all propaganda. It's all propaganda that they have paid to spread. Aram says, I would love to use public transportation to commute if it was more accessible. Enjoy a book. Yeah, I used to live in New York. Public transportation is dope as hell, man. Okay, let's see here. Scrolling down to the bottom, lovely X Vamp says, "Do you think we are going to help Ukraine? Can send weapons or not?" I gotta be honest. I'm a little. I don't know what to think about this because it weirdly seems like Trump is more open to supporting Ukraine. I don't know if this is like a bargaining move that he's using to try to extract more things out of Putin. But yeah, he's finally on the right side of this issue. I don't think that he's doing it for the right reasons, but yeah. Fucking weird as shit. I don't know, man. 386 Pete says, why are Democrats the party of racism, segregation, Jim Crow, and the KKK? They used to be, Pete, but then the parties switched ideologies during the LBJ administration, Lyndon B. Johnson administration. Did you not know that, 386 Pete? If this is new information for you, let me know, and I would love to talk to you more about that because I don't like it when people just spread that factoid. It is right-wing propaganda to say that, but not add the part that the Republican Party is now the party of racist policy, of segregation, of Jim Crow, of anti-LGBTQ, of the KKK. Donald Trump's dad was in the KKK, right? 386 Pete, are you still here, or are you just weirdly quiet right now, my man? All right, Banda Boss. Sorry, where was that comment that you were asking about? Banda Boss. K2 says, do we need a Roosevelt-style trust-busting campaign? 100%. That's what Lena Khan was doing at Biden's FTC, Banda Boss. Yeah, I answered that one already, Banda Boss. Let's see here. Dan Black wrote this great Washington Post article from 2016 titled, KKK formally endorses Trump. Yeah, check that shit out. Short says, does BBB decrease taxes but increase cost of living for middle class and below? Yes, BBB. I do not believe there are fresh tax cuts for the middle class in the BBB. I am confident that there are fresh tax cuts for the billionaire class in the BBB, but I'm pretty sure that for everybody else, the middle class and below, it is just going to be increased cost of living. Alrighty. 386 Pete, where are you, my guy? I was engaging with you, my man. Bandabos says, my comment said that most billionaires are actually self-made, 87%. I got to be honest, I'm really skeptical of that number, Bandabos. I will look into it if you want to, hash this out. My DMs are open. You can hit me up via my Discord or email me through my website. But yeah, everything that I have read is antithetical to that data point there. So I gotta. It was on the Google AI summary thing. Yeah, you really can't trust AI all that well. Right now, Grok is fucking spouting anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So it's the Rocketeer says, just got back from WeHo in downtown. Happy to report Los Angeles is still not on fire like it never was. Thank you for that, the Rocketeer. Completely Lawless says, would you have preferred for the TCJA not to be extended considering modification wasn't an option? What is the TCJA? Completely Lawless? If that is the tax cuts for billionaires things, I know it by a different name, but please elucidate me. Short says self-made includes people with exceedingly wealthy parents who had more ability to take risks. Bandabos, that is probably where that data is getting skewed. So yeah, self-made parents who were extremely self-made billionaires whose parents were extremely wealthy or extremely well connected also do not count as being self-made. Completely Lawless is the 2017 Trump tax cuts that got extended in the BBB. Thank you, Completely Lawless. Yes, I 100% would have rather they were not extended. And in fact, I would rather tax the billionaire class and the millionaire class at a higher rate. Let's see here. Bandabos says the AI summaries are from the website, so it's not the AI, but the websites the AI gets the info from. Yeah, Bandabos, AI is still, it's not great. AI is not great. It can be useful, it can be accurate, but yeah. Yorkshire Man in Polska says only U.S. politics. It's my specialty. You can ask me questions about foreign affairs, but I'm not going to be. I'm not as confident that I'll be able to answer those questions. Bandabos says I'm going to watch a movie now. Have fun. Well, have fun watching your movie, Bandabos. But again, engage with me on this. It doesn't have to be I'm right, you're wrong, or whatever. It can be us learning things together. Completely Lawless says, do you think catering to billionaires is a political system problem or a Republican issue? It's both. Completely Lawless. So billionaires mostly give money to Republican candidates. In 2024, 75% of all billionaire donations went to the Republican Party. The Republican Party knows this. It is the reason why their platform is a giveaway to the billionaire class by cutting regulations for their businesses, supporting subsidies for their wildly profitable businesses, and, of course, repeatedly cutting taxes for the billionaire class. It is also the reason why they fight to regulate campaign finance regulations, campaign finance donations. The reason why they are cool with campaign finance violations from Donald Trump and Elon Musk and shit like that. The reason why they petitioned the Supreme Court to make changes to campaign finance law to make it easier for billionaires to fund their campaigns. Now, because we now have this system where billionaires can put as much money into politics as possible, the Democrats are also incentivized to work with the billionaire class and giant corporations in order to stay competitive. I give the Democratic Party a lot of leeway for that because it's important for them to stay competitive, even if it is not the best look to accept billionaire money. I would still rather have a billionaire-funded Democrat than a billionaire-funded Republican, because at least the billionaire-funded Democrat is telling me the right things before they go in and not do those things. That being said, there are way more people in the Democratic Party who are not taking billionaire donations. I really don't believe there's any in the Republican Party. But the Democratic Party has the AOCs and the Jasmine Crockett's and the Katie Porters and the Bernie Sanderses and the Maxwell Frosts and the Tim Wallses and the insert Democrat that doesn't take billionaire dollars here. Insert Democrat that is on the record about taxing the billionaires. Zohran Mamdani, Democrat. That is team get money out of politics. That is team tax the billionaire class. All right, Quinn, good to see you again, says, do you think we should not be involved in any foreign conflicts like Israel and Ukraine? I don't think that it is valuable to be dogmatic about that. I think it needs to be case by case. I do not think that we should be continuing to send money and weapons to Israel because they have been found guilty of doing war crimes against the people of Palestine. But Ukraine is just trying to defend themselves. And by assisting Ukraine, we are decimating the Russian military. They're having to import troops from North Korea. We have decimated the Russian economy with our sanctions. And we are stopping the war from escalating to NATO countries, where it would be then contractually obligated to send boots on the ground to protect them, you know? All right, let's see here. FitMen Fusion says taxing the wealthy at a higher rate only increases their utilization of tax loopholes and shelters, which we can also stop. FitMen Fusion, you know, there's nothing innate about billionaires being able to skirt tax law. You know, we change the laws. They do something shady, they exploit a loophole, we close the loophole. You know, we make them pay it. You know, the tax system is fungible, my guy. K2 says Dems have big tech funding them. Zoran is not exactly representative of the core party beliefs. K2, that is inaccurate. The Democratic Party is a rainbow coalition with a bunch of different kinds of people. You have centrists and you have progressives and you have you have social democrats and you have younger candidates and older candidates and the LGBTQ caucus and the African American caucus and the Latin American caucus and the Jewish American caucus. So yeah, as far as like Dems have big tech funding them, they do, but also Republicans have big tech funding them. Republicans are the ones that own the social media platforms like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. But again, you know, it's easy to cherry pick data points to make it seem like the point you're making is accurate, but you need to take a more holistic approach to things. Like, look at the net. The net is that billionaires give more money to Republicans. Donald Trump has more billionaires in his cabinet than any president in history. And the Republican Party has repeatedly massively cut taxes for the billionaire class at the detriment of the 99%. They have cut regulations for their businesses that allow them to put more pollution into our air and our water, and cut safety regulations for food production and medicine production. They have increased subsidies for wildly profitable corporations and fossil fuel companies, you know? So yeah, you know, have a couple of tech billionaires helped out Democratic candidates? Sure. But most billionaires, including tech billionaires like Peter Thiel, they support the Republican Party for a reason, too. Nick says Democrats are the cancer of this country. That's not a question, so you are out of here. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba. CA Alex says, do we need term limits on Congress, Senate, Supreme Court? I'd be for it. Dean LF Theru says, hi, Jared. Hi back, Dean. Alexander says, what traits do you believe make an effective president? I would say empathy, probably. Empathy. Honesty. John Bradley says, need to take money out of politics, over $8 billion on political campaigns. Completely agree with that. That's why I support the Democratic Party. Let's see here. Kaz Teo says, how do you join the Democratic Party and start working with/for them? I mean, it's easy to register to be a Democrat, but that does not mean that you are working with them or for them. If you want to do the work of trying to elect Democrats, you don't need to be formally hired. You can just find a campaign that you want to support, or you can just like talk to people in your life about why the Democratic Party is better than the Republican Party. But I'm sure that the DNC or the DCCC are hiring for some positions that you could apply for. Shork says, can you explain why many Democrats voted not to impeach Trump? Absolutely, Shork. Excellent question. Thank you so much for it. So there is an open question about the value of impeaching Donald Trump without control of the House or the Senate, because that is going to go nowhere if they don't have the majority of the votes. Now, during the first Trump administration, I was advocating for voting to impeach him for every bad thing that he did, because I was like, impeachment should work like a robot, like a machine. Like, person does illegal thing, gets impeached. Button pushed, gets impeached, that kind of a thing. I'm a little bit less convinced that that is the case now, because during his first administration, he was impeached twice, and it did not have the weight that it should have. You know, he was successfully impeached twice, and the Senate did not vote to remove him from office because the Democrats did not have a 3/4 majority, 67 seats. So now it's still an open question here in the second administration. You know, Trump has done so many wildly impeachable things. Is it more valuable to just impeach, potentially watering down the value of the action, potentially making it seem like Democrats will impeach Donald Trump for putting on his pants, you know, the wrong way, or, you know, he put his right leg in before his left leg. He's clearly partisan hack. Impeach the guy, you know? That's what they're going to say on Fox News, regardless of if they impeach him once or 1,000 times. Or is it more valuable to not let him get away with anything? Are we, you know, giving our tacit acceptance of the wildly lawless and corrupt and fascist things that Donald Trump is doing by not calling for articles of impeachment every single fucking thing that he does? Part of the issue that we have with politics right now is, where are people's attention? How can we get people to recognize what Trump and the Republican Party are doing and get them to realize the value of voting against them? And so, yeah, a bunch of Democrats made the political messaging decision to vote against an impeachment inquiry that was never going to go anywhere because Mike Johnson is in charge of the House. They don't have the votes to actually win an impeachment. They don't have the votes to control an impeachment hearing. You know, Mike Johnson could just have a bunch of political hacks be the inquiry, you know, committee, and then every single piece of evidence is just about how great of a president Donald Trump is and how Democrats are socialist psychopaths, you know? So yeah, I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know if it's some combination of the two. I don't know if the move is, you know, keeping the real politic of it in consideration, or just impeaching for everything that he deserves to be impeached for. But I don't think that the answer is in yelling at Democrats for not fighting Trump harder than you are yelling at Trump for doing the things that Trump is doing. I don't think that spending 90% of your energy yelling about the Democratic Party when it's the Republican Party that are doing the fucking things that we need to be yelling about. All right. Thank you very much for your question, Short. Are you still here? Archie says, are you pro or anti-MAGA? I am anti-MAGA. I am anti-MAGA politicians. And I have a lot of empathy for anybody who got tricked into voting for the Republican Party. And that is not to say that Republicans are more or less gullible than people on the left. There are plenty of people on the left who got tricked into not voting in the 2024 election. All right. Tyron says Democrats aren't in power right now. That is accurate. Key says, what does the Supreme Court ruling where Justice Jackson dissented Trump can reorganize federal government mean? I'm not 100% sure which case you're referring to, Key. If I'm remembering correctly, it is just about him being able to fire a bunch of employees that he previously would have had to ask Congress for permission to fire. But I would need to know which case you are specifically referring to. And if I don't know about it, then I promise I'll look it up and have that information for you tomorrow. Lord Gaga says, nobody got tricked. Willful ignorance is not being tricked. Lord Gaga, I would propose to you that there but for the grace of God go you and I. Maybe if you had been born into that town, going to that church, getting all of your news off of that Facebook feed, maybe you would have gotten tricked by Donald Trump as well. Are there really shitty people that vote for Republicans because they're racist or because they're billionaires who want to keep all their money and want to poison us with the chemical runoff from their factories? Absolutely, 100%. But that is not every Republican voter. And having that attitude, that us versus them attitude, I don't believe that that's productive. All right, K2 says, what does the right do for society that's good in your eyes? Do you think they're ontologically evil? So I don't think that the voters are evil ontologically. But I do think that Republican politicians and Republican talking heads and the billionaire class that is working with them are, you know, at their core, there's something fucking wrong with them. You know, it feels a little hyperbolic to call them evil. I've definitely done that in the past. You know, I don't know if there's a, you know, if it's productive to try to find more, I don't know, careful scalpel-like language as opposed to just the blanket, they're fucking evil people. But like, I don't know how you justify doing the things that the Republican Party and the talking heads that support them have done. I don't know if it's okay that they're letting thousands, potentially millions of people with AIDS die by cutting funding for USAID. The fact that they are risking the deaths of so many Americans by fucking up their pandemic responses and cutting services for the VA and mass firing veterans and cutting taxes for the wealthy so that they can buy another fucking golden jet that's not going to, they're kicking people out of their fucking homes. People living on the street. People can't afford their medicine, their food, and they're the ones that are doing that. The right-wing talking heads, the billionaire class, and the Republican politicians, they're the ones that are voting for this shit to fucking happen. Every school shooting that they decide it is more important to them to win elections by being pro-Second Amendment to the point of not taking these dangerous guns out of dangerous people's hands, that is on them. I don't know if you want to call that evil or not. It feels kind of evil to me. But what does the right do that's good for society? I have absolutely no idea. And I honestly don't think that it's worth our time and energy to look for the silver lining around people like John Wayne Gacy, you know? Tony from the 305 says the DNC is going broke because Trump euthanized the USAID cash cow. Tony from the 305, that is not a question. That is also clearly right-wing propaganda. So whoa, hold on a second. Your bio says moderate Democrat, but not a socialist. Tony, I gotta be honest, I'm skeptical, Tony. Prove me wrong, prove me wrong. Say something in the comments to prove me wrong, but I don't think you're a moderate Dem. I think you're a hard right-wing extremist who believes conspiracy theories. Trippy 0087 says, can you make excise taxes on green energy make sense? No, I cannot, Trippy. So sorry about that. And says, what are things Democrats disagree on with socialists? I think it's really just a question of scale. You know, like socialists in the Democratic Party, people like AOC, Democratic Socialists like AOC and Bernie Sanders, they believe in doing everything that they can to make universal health care happen as quickly as possible. The centrists have a much more incrementalist attitude towards it, where they're like, well, maybe we can get a public option first. Maybe we can do things to make health insurance more affordable. Maybe we can regulate it to the point where people who have cancer treatments that they need are not getting denied coverage for no fucking reason. And, you know, there's an open debate on whether or not those two things are the right moves. I'm more of a progressive, so I much more agree with the progressive side of that argument. Like, let's do universal health care right now, even though it will be hard, even though until we get there, it'll be a little expensive to change all that infrastructure. But I do think that that's the move, you know? Whereas the view of the Republican Party is, don't worry about it. The free market's going to handle it, man. The free market's going to make healthcare and health insurance, everything so much more affordable. You don't even have to fucking worry your pretty little head about that. And that's what I'm voting against when I vote for Democrats, regardless of if they are centrist or progressives. Matto Kaya says, Democratic Socialist is a bad idea. I don't think so, Matto. You shouldn't say things like that that are open debates as though they are facts. All right, let's see here. K-Gen says we don't have universal health care because of racism. I think that that is a very valid argument to make. Karina1133 says, mine says clash involving the 3K. Think my search is filtered. I'm not really sure what that means. Let's see here. AJ Text Politics says, I have a question. I'm not sure if you bring up guests. I don't typically, AJ, but put your question in the chat. And says, aren't there countries with universal health care has been successful already? Why is it a debate? It's a debate because people that have a lot of money in the healthcare industry want it to be a debate. Insurance companies, the billionaire owners of insurance companies, they want to keep the system that we have today that is more expensive and gives people worse healthcare outcomes. Because, yeah, every country that has done universal healthcare loves universal healthcare, and they fight tooth and nail to keep it. Trippy 0087 says, not only do they want to transfer all the wealth from the poor to the rich, also, I'm not really sure what the rest of that sentence is. Spike says, how can religion and politics be permanently separated? It just has to be politicians that do it. If we elect politicians who are actively demolishing the wall between church and state, who are sitting judges to the Supreme Court and below, who are tearing down the wall between the separation of church and state, then we are not going to be able to separate church and state. It is all about electing the right people, you know, and we've been electing the wrong people for a really long time. Not a dog in a suit says, what even is a politic? Politics is the, you know, discussing the way that our government is working and who's doing what in our government exactly. AJ Talks Politics says, how do you feel limiting stock buybacks will affect the budget? and will it ever be changed? You know, I want to know more about this, AJ, before I opine on it. I will say that it has always rubbed me the wrong way that we give these massive corporations and these billionaires all these tax cuts, and then they just use it to buy their own stock and inflate its price and increase their own net value, so they can borrow more money at lower interest rates and become even richer. So yeah, I don't know about any argument for the negative knock-on effects of making that kind of buyback scheme illegal. But I'm open to it because, again, I've seen the way that the billionaire class is exploiting that system for their own benefits and the detriment of everybody else. And O says, why did Bernie not win in 2016? Were not enough young people voting in 2016? So people write entire books about that topic. And my personal theory is that there were a lot of people who really liked Hillary Clinton. You know, for all of the energy and dynamism of the young progressive movement in this country, there are just still a lot more people who are moderates and who are centrists on the Democratic side, who believe in, like that there's some value on the right and the left, and they eschew any kind of extremism, be it the right or the left. And I think that a lot of people were turned off by the fact that Bernie Sanders called himself a democratic socialist. You know, the red scare, the effects of it are still echoing throughout our culture. We're just labeling something communist or socialist means that it's a bad thing, without actually delving into what those words mean or what those systems what the systems are. So yeah, I think it's that. I think that Hillary Clinton had a lot more name ID. She had a really strong fan base. She had decades of successful work in government. And as much as I was a stand for Bernie, there's just no debating the fact that Hillary Clinton ran away with it. Shork says, what do you think about Buttigieg being for president? He's not my first choice. His policies are a little bit more centrist than I would like. But I really like Buttigieg as far as he's an excellent communicator. I do think that representation is important. So I would love to have a president who represents the LGBTQ community. I love that he's young. I think that we need to have more generational change in politics. I worry that America might be too homophobic to elect him in a general election. And I also worry that the Democratic primary voters would not vote for Buttigieg in the primary because they're worried that the general election would not vote for him the general population would not vote for him in the general election. K2 says, why is Israel so untouchable in politics? Because AIPAC, which is the lobbying group that advocates for Israel, they have a lot of power, and they have a lot of money. They are able to paint any politician that they want as anti-Semitic, and they are able to direct billions of dollars of campaign donations to fund primary challengers or fund your opponent in the general election. And then there's also the shitty reasons why Israel is so powerful, in that there are too many elected Republicans who believe in this revelation theory of the case where Israel needs to take over the entire Middle East to bring about the rapture and the apocalypse. There are some elected Republicans who really believe that, the reason we need to be supporting Israel is so that the rapture happens and they can get fucking zooted up to heaven while the rest of us have to live here in hell because we're all heathens or some shit like that. That's terrifying. People should be able to have whatever religion they want, but I do not think that my elected officials should be advocating for a war criminal Netanyahu because they believe that it's going to bring about the apocalypse. That's kind of weird, right? Doesn't seem like the kind of thing that I want my elected representatives to think, K. Jen says, the funniest thing is most of them don't even read the Bible. Yeah, accurate. Karina1133 says, I'm pretty sure this is hell. I mean, yeah, it's difficult, but what I would say to that is there's if you'll forgive me at 1 hour and 20 minutes. God, I'm really cooking today. I didn't even realize I'd been going on for so long. But yeah, I'll just say this. This is something that I use to try to feel better about this stuff when it gets me down. Is that there's this play by Thornton Wilder called Our Town. That's one of the things that you kind of learn in that play is that the afterlife is this like void where it is so absent of any kind of it's so absent of anything that you yearn for anything. Even pain, even sadness, even struggle is better than the nothing that is the afterlife. And so I like to think about that when things are rough here in the world, in reality, where everything is a gift. You know, the bad days are a gift, the good days are a gift, the struggle is a gift, pain is a gift. Yeah, you know, I know it could be probably little consolation to somebody who's like in a fucking concentration camp in Florida or El Salvador or some shit like that, but you know, it can be stressful to try to fix what's going on, and I don't know. It's something that's always helped me. So maybe it can be a comfort to others as well. CA Alex says, "Are you optimistic about the future of politics in the U.S.? I am if people do the work, but if people don't, then I will not be." Carmine, my wife is going to love that comment. All right, everybody, it's an hour 20. I should probably get out of here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you for your gifts and your likes and your shares. I appreciate any support that you give me, whether it is the free kind or the financial kind. If you want to support the channel more than just the free ways, then you can, but you don't have to. You can join my Patreon. I got 4 patrons. They're the fucking best. You should join them. They would love your company. You can buy things from my store. You can find both of those things on my website, jarrettberenstein.com. And you can subscribe and send gifts on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube and all the various social media channels that I am on. Give me a follow, you know, shit like that. If there were any questions that I was not able to get to or something comes up later, my DMs are open. You can email me through my website. I am not in this just for this show. I'm in this to actually change minds, to recruit people to the cause, and to actually affect the kind of political change that makes all of our lives easier. My regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. And yeah, my schedule and my live stream schedule and my stand-up schedule can be found on my website, jarrettberenstein.com. And lastly, just my heartfelt plea for everybody to do the work. Go to my Discord. I have a thread posted for what the work is. So I hope that you all are doing the work. You're recruiting other people to do the work, because that is the only way that we get out of this. There is not an organization on the planet that has enough resources or political power to save us right now. The only group that can do it is us, because there are a lot more of us than there are of them. So if you want to know what the work is, go to my Discord channel. You can find the link in my bio. And yeah, and then just do it. And then recruit other people to do it as well. All right, everybody. See you guys tomorrow. Be good to yourselves. Be good to everybody. Self-care is part of the work. And I will see y'all tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. 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 Goodbye.